Hello everyone and welcome to the latest Rangers Rabble my Rangers 11 podcast. I'm your host Craig, where I'd speak to a member of the Rangers world, look at their Rangers team, a bit different to the usual best 11 or favourite 11 where invariably 7 or 8 of the same team get picked every single week. The criteria for getting into this team is completely up to the guest. It could be the first player they ever saw wearing a Rangers kit, player that scored their favourite goal at Ibrox, or any other choice that they want to make. So I'm joined today by one of Rangers media royalty, Mr. David Edgar. How are you?
I don't know about that. I'm good, thank you. Nice to be here. It's an interesting challenge because, as you say, when you get asked for your 11, it's pretty standard for especially guys my age. The names that will be in. There's some hard choices to be made, but that got me thinking actually on those hard choices, and I thought, well, here's a chance for the guys that I've had to leave out in the past. So I decided I'd go for my second choice 11. Because we all have our Goff and Gaza, Loudrop, Haitley, McCoy. So I wanted to go right. Okay, well, if they weren't available, if we had Rangers medical team 22-23, then and 11 of them were out, who would be the 11 that I would bring in the back of that? So that's what today's going to be.
Nice. So no nail guns from the medical team. I think one of our podders a while back said the Rangers team put bandages on with nail guns this season by the looks of
it.
Well,
that's the thing. They would have been playing, the 11 in my team, there were quite a few lads that would have played with a broken leg if you'd let them. So it probably wouldn't have been as big an issue. But no, it is interesting because we come to pick these 11s. We've all done it, sitting with mates, and you go, right, I'd have him, and there's some debate. So now I get to go, right, okay, great, well, I'll take away those ones. That's my dream Rangers 11, but who would then be the follow-up? Who'd be the next lot? And I tell you what, it's still a hell of a team.
Yeah, I'm sure it will be. Right, we'll get straight into it. Who's we won't go into tactics or formations, but who's your goalkeeper?
Well, it's 4-4-2, which probably won't surprise anybody. And I make no apology for that. That's the Rangers formation. We win things with a 4-4-2. Anyway, that's the tactics geeks. I'll turn them off and say, oh God, it's a dinosaur. I'm going to pick in goals Alan McGregor. Andy Gorham would be the first choice for me. And it's the everlasting debate. Rangers have been incredibly lucky with goalkeepers because basically if you're my age, you've gone a straight line from Chris Woods through Andy Gorham, through Stefan Klos, through Alan McGregor. And that's anywhere in the world. Genuinely, I think that rivals anywhere in the world. For me, Gorham 92-93 was the best I've ever seen. In that, I don't think there was anybody else in the world who was better than him. Genuinely. I think that's probably the only time in my lifetime that I've looked at a Rangers player and thought, there is nobody better at what you do than what you do. But in terms of contribution, professionalism, longevity, Alan McGregor wins those battles. So while I think that Gorham at his best was better than McGregor at his best, I'll go for McGregor. Both had this incredible ability to make saves that you just thought you shouldn't have been able to. Alan McGregor, the two that everybody picks out, and I think deservedly so, Werder Bremen and then Slavia Prague. Two incredible saves where you really do have to watch it a couple of times and you're still not sure how he managed to do it. That's good positioning. We often say we goalkeepers are in the right place at the right time. That ain't luck, for a top goalkeeper. Much in the same way as it's not luck for a top striker to be there when the rebound drops. But even at that, the ball was coming at an angle that was so fast. And the one in Prague, it was a goal. I mean, you see the Prague players celebrate. It's going in. There's no way to stop that. And to not only get to it and keep, but to then hold it was just incredible. And he's a character, as we all know. He's a wonderful, this wonderful almost cartoon at times of Alan McGregor with, the legendary abilities, time wasting. He's the best time waster in the whole world. He's elevated it to an art. And he is somebody that passionately pro Rangers. I think he was an absolute no-brainer for the Hall of Fame. Could have waited till he was retired, but I think he was a no-brainer. And while I think as we record today, that we're coming to the end of 22-23's time is up, because there's one battle no sportsman can win, and that's the one against time. It shouldn't be forgotten. I think the best goalkeeper Rangers ever had was Andy Gorham, but I think the greatest Rangers goalkeeper is Alan McGregor. So he would be my goalkeeper.
Nice. Yeah, that save was it was more of his wrist, wasn't it, rather than his actual hand that stopped it. I'd throw the the Red Star Belgrade one as well. That was an unbelievable save, the penalty one. That he shouldn't have any way of stopping that penalty. And
the power in your arm that you need to get to that and keep it out. I mean, even if a lot of goalkeepers would have got a hand to it, but they wouldn't have kept it out because of the power in it. It was just a remarkable. And there's so many of those games. We were talking about this on our show a while ago about against Maribor. In that first season that Gerrard was here, he was incredible. It doesn't really get talked about, but they even got a penalty in the last minute, and it didn't really matter because they needed, I think they needed 2 or 3 at that point. But they got a penalty in injury time, and he saved it because it was that night, nothing was getting past them. It was heroic goalkeeping performance.
Nice. So that's your goalkeeper. Very, very great choice. Who's your second choice of your team? Your right back.
This was quite a difficult one because Rangers, I don't think, have been, particularly blessed in that position. It's been a bit of a problem position at times during, my lifetime. So the one that I eventually went for was James Tavernier. Gary Stevens would be my first choice right back. And then a lot of other times, even in successful Rangers teams, there's been players playing there who weren't naturally, I think, fitted to it. I think you would have, if you look at the 9-0 teams, Dave McPherson would play in there quite a bit. Then you had Alex Cleland, who was a decent, no world beater. Sergio Perini, of course, played there with Advocat, so he was in consideration. But I'm going to give it to Tav. The thing is, and I can hear, a lot of people I know that go, oh, he's not a good defender, and he isn't. I think we all need to be mature enough to accept that now. But I think there's a slight misapprehension from some supporters that a line I hear a lot is his first job is to defend. No, it isn't. Not in modern football. It's not. And I know that some people find that quite hard to understand, which called the defender, and he is, but it's not his job. He's in the team to create and score goals, and he is effectively Rangers playmaker a lot of the time. So I would put Tav in there. I don't think that he's on a level with some of the other players that are going to be in this team. Some absolutely incredible players, but even so, for me, it is Gary Stevens, because I think Gary Stevens redefined my idea and a lot of Rangers fans' idea of what a right back was, in terms of he was ahead of his time. He was excellent at getting forward. He was incredible, and you didn't really see that back then. Somebody that was bombing up and down the wing, whereas he could do that because he was incredibly fit. But he could defend as well. But he was the England right back, let's not forget. There are levels, and he was the first choice England right back. So that tells you of his quality. So he'd be my first choice, but for my team, I'd go with Tav. And I've got, look, there are times I get frustrated that he's defending, don't get me wrong, but the amount of times that he's dug Rangers out and he's been the biggest threat, and he's been the guy that's produced, over 100 goals now, which is just nuts, really, for a right back, even in the modern game. And yeah, for me, and see, for 200 grand, James Tavernier's been an incredible servant to Rangers.
Yeah, I think he is definitely one that I think it gets said quite a lot, that people won't realise how good he actually was until he's until he's out the door.
Yeah, and I get I'm a traditionalist, so I get the defending thing. Because it does drive you nuts, but in modern football you need fullbacks that can get forward, you need fullbacks that can contribute. I think a great example is Liverpool with Trent Alexander-Arnold, where Klopp has basically said, yeah, it'll cost us goals sometimes, I know that, but it's worth it for everything else that we get from him. And that's the way football has gone. And you can bemoan that fact, but I don't think it's fair to criticise the players who, let's remember, have been brought up and educated to do what they do. So, it's just where we are in 2023 with football.
Unfortunately, yeah. So McGregor and Tav, who will flip over to the other side of the pitch, who gets in as your left back?
I've gone backwards and forwards in this one about who would be my left back, because I think there's a lot of, people would, talk about Arthur Newman. I would talk about John Brown as well, being in the equation there. John Brown was a super footballer, really, really brilliant footballer, vastly underrated, because of, the image, and he was tough and he was hard, but he could play. He could really play. But I'm going to go for a personal favourite here, which is Stuart Monroe. He was in the Rangers team when I first really started being consciously aware of it. Never the most glamorous. Cost £15,000 from Alloa, which even then wasn't a lot of money.
No. And
he was, Souness tried to replace him 3 or 4 times and never could. I think that's pretty telling that he could never do it. Another name, David Robertson, but David Robertson would make my first team. And I know younger fans go, what, ahead of Newman? Yes, ahead of Newman. But yeah, for me, Stuart Monroe was, I think, the archetypal Rangers player. You can't have 11 superstars to win a team. You can't have 11 individuals. I think we just need to look at Chelsea in 2023. They're all good players. They all cost a fortune, but they're a shambles of a team. You need guys that are prepared to. You need guys that understand not everyone in the team is a superstar. I have a job and I'll do it, and I'll do it quietly. And later on, we had another Stuart Monroe, I think, in Sasa Papac. With these 2 guys, you knew you were getting 7 out of 10 every week. So you didn't have to worry about your fullback position. You didn't have to spend a fortune on your fullback position. You could go and put that money where it matters, the goal scorer. Yeah, the guys that are going to win you matches, talented players, if you like. But he was a good tackler. He was really, really defensively sound. He knew positionally where to be. He could tuck in, couple of centre backs, and he never got injured, and he was reliable. I'd kill for a Stuart Monroe right now.
I'd kill for 11 Stuart Monroes at the minute.
Yeah.
Just players that actually play.
Souness tried 4 times, by spending money, and I actually did a show with him in Melbourne at an RSC, and I asked him about that, and he said, well, each time he tried, he said, first of all, he told all the Scottish players as soon as when he came in, he said, I've inherited you. Remember that, you're not my players. And it wasn't just, it was Duran, McMahon, McCoy, all of them got told that. He said, so I felt he always wanted his own man, and he said, but he was spending like 300,000-400,000 on them, which was money, but it wasn't he has to play him money. He said, so I always thought, no, I'll stick about and challenge for the spot, and he always ended up getting it back. He left because Walter spent nearly £1 million on David Robertson, and he thought, £1 million, he's got to play. He can't leave him out. But he said he regrets it. He said, because obviously I would have still played and still could have contributed. I should have hung on. But yeah, very good player.
Nice. So fullbacks covered. Across to centre backs, who's the first in your team centre back?
The first centre back who would be in my team, if it had been, my team would be Terry Butcher. So I wanted to get somebody who would be that kind of, big, solid defender. And I'm going to go for Carlos Cuellar here. We only got 1 season out of him, and it was his best season. And I don't think it was coincidentally, because he was next to my other pick in there, which is Davy Weir. A lot of Rangers defenders, Danny Wilson's another one, never ever looked as good as when they were partnered by Davy Weir. And that tells you something. That really tells you something. In Cuellar's case, he was just everything I like in a centre-back. My other one for the big team, by the way, would be Goff. He was just everything I like in a centre-half, which he was dogged. He was brilliant in the air. He didn't lose one-to-ones, didn't lose duels. He could tackle. He could make recovery tackles. He could tuck in. The word that keeps springing to mind is solid. And next to him, as I say, and captain in the side of Davy Weir, because every side needs a leader. Everybody needs composure, especially playing at Rangers with the pressure that we're under. And the way that teams play against us, where it's a cup final and it's 110 mile an hour, he would be the guy that just played his own game and played it at his tempo. And I'll be honest, when Rangers were first linked to him, I was like, Davy Weir, really? It'll do to the summer till Walter brings in players that he wants. And he was just magnificent. His time with Rangers, he was just fantastic. And I think that partnership took us to the European final, and it was built on that partnership, that side. It really was. So I'll go for those two.
Nice, yeah, that's a pretty good back four. So into midfield, right side midfield. Who gets into your second 11?
Well, Laudrup would get into my first 11 for obvious reasons. Even though he's not really a right winger, but you fit him in and you tell him there's a ball, just go and do what you want to do with it. But I'm going for Trevor Steven. Trevor Steven, particularly in his first spell, his second was injury hit, was a magnificent football player. He was very skillful. He was tough, right? Because he played it in the wing for Everton, and he got the shit kicked out of him on a weekly basis. But he was tough. He could, get in there, and if teams would try to kick him, he would just bounce up and go again. But he had the ability to time a run into the box. The modern equivalent, I would say, is probably Frank Lampard, of that ability to pick the perfect time to make the run, to find a little bit of space and be there. He was a terrific passer of a ball, and his crossing was out because he'd played wide at Everton. His crossing was superb. He could do a bit of everything, and of course that was what prompted Marseille to pay 5.5 million, which at the time was an enormous amount of money for a player. And it was because of that range that he had. He had technical ability that I think far exceeded a lot of British players at that time. So no hesitation at all in picking him.
Nice. So across the other side, left hand, who gets in on the left side?
Well, it'd be Davy Cooper in my normal team. So in this team, I'm going for Mark Walters. Anybody who was about that era that saw Mark Walters will agree with me. He was fantastic. He wasn't the Cooper, he would beat men and the dribbling skills at the time. He was more direct, almost again more modern, like these wide forwards that we have now. In that he was quick, but again he was skillful. It wasn't just raw pace, and if you denied him space, you couldn't. That was him out of game. No, you could deny him space, but that's fine because he liked having the ball. He was good with the ball at his feet. He had a good shot on him as well. He knew where the goal was, and he could carry the ball at pace, which is an incredibly difficult thing for a defender to put up with. And yeah, I've never met a Rangers fan from back in that era that didn't think he was absolutely terrific, which tells you something about him. I loved him as a kid, and when I watch back, old Rangers games from that era, he's another one that I think you were a wee bit ahead. You could play your type of play is what we watch on a weekly basis. There's a lot of guys out there who play like Mark Walters now. There weren't many who played like him then.
Nice. So yeah, I think we've got a few at the minute that have got all the pace, but none of the actual to keep the ball.
That's exactly it. And we've seen so many players come through, and not just us. I think Traore at Wolves is a great example.
Yeah.
There needs to be an end product. Can you pick the right pass? Are you good enough to execute it? Can you finish? He could, and that's the difference. Pace is great, and you'll get a career at a pace. But you've got to develop something else if you want to be a top player. It's a wonderful weapon to have in your armoury, don't get me wrong, but it needs to be married to something else. And Walters could pretty much do anything. And whenever we had injury issues, he could go up front and play up front, which, again, not an easy thing to do back in that era where defenders could legitimately kick you and pretty much get away with it. So you had to be quite physically tough as well, and he was.
Nice. So this team so far is starting to be a bit special. So I'm looking forward to the last few players. Who's in the middle of the park?
Middle of the park, in the Gaza role, if you like, because Gaza would be in my team. I went for Ian Durrant, and with Ian Durrant, there's a tendency, and I think understandably, to remember what he was like before his injury, where he was on the verge of being world class. And again, I think for younger bears who didn't see him, that Lampard comparison, I think, is a good one. Gundogan at Man City, I think, is another one that reminds me of what Durant could do, because he could do pretty much everything. He was good on the ball. His passing was first class and crisp and quick, and he could dictate the tempo. His timing of runs into the box was superb, and he was a natural finisher, like as good a finisher as a striker. But there's a tendency then, almost sort of finish on that and then say, and he was, he came back after his injury, but he was never the same. No, he wasn't, but he realised, I can't do this every game. Him and Walter realised he couldn't produce it on a weekly basis, so they saved it for big occasions. And look at the amount of Old Firms, European games, cup finals, massive league deciders against Celtic that Ian Durrant was pivotal in. He was still a fabulous player. And then at the end of his career, he goes to Kilmarnock, takes a different role of just sitting in front of the midfield and wins the Writers' Player of the Year, gets back in the Scotland team. He was that good. So Ian Durrant in there for me.
Alongside Ian? Well,
you need a holding midfielder. And it's a tough one in there because we've had some really, really excellent ones over the year that have played that position. I've gone for Barry Ferguson, and I'm doing him a disservice saying he's a holding midfielder because he wasn't only that. I think that Barry, I've said this before, the best, most talented player I've ever seen at Rangers is Laudrup, right? Yeah. But the best individual season I've ever seen from a Rangers player was Barry Ferguson 2002-2003. He was just sensational. He had a little bit of everything. He scored goals. He created goals. He won the ball back. He dominated the middle of the park. He organised. He harried the rest of them. He had that wonderful link up with Ronald de Boer at the time. He was just fabulous. He was just incredible. And as I say, to this day, I don't think I've seen a finer season in terms of consistency and levels reached. We talk about Mr. 7 out of 10. Barry was 9 most weeks that season. He was fabulous. So he would go. He'd probably be in the half that I haven't made him the captain right enough. But it's going to Davy Weir, so we can't. He could be vice captain.
Cool. So I'm intrigued with Barry getting into this team. Who was the pick for the other team?
I would have went for Souness in the other team because I'm a Rangers fan for the 80s. Can't have a Rangers team without Souness. That's that simple. Ian Ferguson was a shout as well. I think is an underrated player, a winner, a real winner.
Souness Gascoigne central partnership would have been quite interesting.
Souness sitting there, Gaza, Wayne, do what you do. Souness just sit there, dominate in the middle of the park, just keep the ball, and Gaza, you don't need to worry about back here. On you go and do your magic up front. Would be unplayable.
Laudrup, Gascoigne, and Cooper, you'd need like 3 or 4 balls on the pitch because they just all would want the ball themselves. Which
absolute dominance.
Well, so we've covered off the goalkeeper, defence, and midfield. Up front, who are your 2 strikers in your second team?
Now this is hard. That's really difficult because you've got McCoy-Stately, I think, is the one for me. So I went back and there's loads of different options and there's loads of guys that I liked and had, little spells here and there. So it was a tough one. First up, I've gone for Mo Johnston. We forget sometimes Mo Johnston, the football player, because of everything that went along with the historic signing and what it did to Celtic. It just screwed them up for about a decade, really. And sometimes then you forget that Mo Johnston was an absolutely terrific football player. Again, if we're talking about the modern era, work rate. This was an era where a lot of strikers were basically, I'm in the team to score goals. If you put me in the team, I'll score goals. But that's it. Right? I'm never walking by 20 yards from goal, really. That's not my job. Your job's to get me the ball. Johnston wasn't like that. Johnston was constant. He harried defenders. He worked the channels. His passing, again, was terrific. His hold-up play. And he was superb in the air for a wee guy. Well, a smaller guy. Absolutely superb in the air. He'd been and played in France before he came to us. And I think that dramatically improved an already very good player.
Yeah.
Just that different coaching and learning. So, yeah, Mo Johnston would go in the team for me. Other guy that I thought about that role was Kenny Miller, who was, a fantastic servant to Rangers. He over 100 goals, and I mean, there you go. So yeah, I'd put him in there
alongside Johnston.
So many options, Peak Alfie would be an option. Nikica Jelavic certainly be an option. Fantastic football player. Michael Malls, certainly pre-injury would have been a candidate, and Rod Wallace, a candidate, that doesn't really get his due. I think of he's kind of just fallen a wee bit, and this was a guy that top scorer on the season. We won a treble, cup final winning goal against Celtic. But I've gone for Chris Boyd. And the reason why is I was probably at the time one of these guys who, all he does is score, right? Which, as I get older and watch strikers who can't do that, I increasingly realise was a slightly stupid position to take. But when we've done the shows where we go back and look at old seasons in detail and we do game by game, Chris Boyd was vital in Rangers winning titles. Vital. Yes, Walter didn't pick him for Europe. Yes, he didn't pick him for Old Firms. But see the amount of games in those title winning seasons under Walter that's, Rangers at home to St Johnstone, Rangers 1-0, Boyd. Rangers versus Hibs, 2-0, Boyd double. Rangers away to Hearts are at 1-0, Boyd. Points and points and points and points. And you need that. And we've had maybe the last few years guys who do raise their game for Europe, for example, but they drop points domestically. With a Boyd in your team, you're much less likely to drop points domestically because if you get him the ball, he'll score. And it's a tight game and there's not much space, he'll find a way to put it in. As I was going back, I'm not talking about one or two. It was so regularly that I think it gets forgotten because it became almost you expected it.
Yeah.
But you take those goals out the team, and you even get a striker in who gets, 15 rather than 25. You don't win the title.
No.
A crucial thing. And he's got Mo next to him to do his running. This, of course, is first era Boyd. I'm not talking about the state
later, yeah.
time. But Chris Boyd at his peak playing next to Mo Johnston with those guys firing the ball, I think you got a lot of goals there.
Yeah, it's the old Ian Rush, like where how many games in the 80s, Liverpool.
Oh,
Ian Rush, he'd play rubbish for 85 minutes and then suddenly pop up with a goal. Liverpool would win. And they'd win the league. Yeah.
Absolutely lethal. In a similar partnership, you had Dalglish there, whose job was to feed him the ball. I remember actually hearing Graham Souness talk about that. He says, at Liverpool, we knew we could get Rushy through facing the goal with the ball at his feet twice over the 90 minutes. He'd get at least one.
Yeah.
He said, so that gave us the belief if we all do our job and get the ball to Rushy, he'll get as the winner. That's a crucial thing. And I think, as I say, the amount of tight games, it could easily have been draws, 2 points dropped, that Boyd is a difference maker. Go back, anybody, just read the games down on Wikipedia and look at the amount of Boyd goals that are points winners, not, the fifth in a 5-0 win, ones that literally got you the points. Massive role.
And what we'd give for that
Oh,
now. We'd give our left leg. No, that's a. I mean, the first team would take some beating, but that team as well. I think if we had even half of that team now, we'd be in a much better position than
we would. The 11 players I've named are still great. They're still wonderful footballers, and the names I've mentioned that didn't make it are still wonderful. I mean, what would you give for a Rod Wallace right now? Genuinely, what would you give for that? At right back, I could have picked Jimmy Nicol, Sergio Perini. The centre half, Boomsong, of course, Boogie. There were so many different options, and let's hope the manager the current manager can find a few like-minded gems come the summer.
Oh, please, that's what we all want. But no, thank you very much for your much appreciated time today. And we'll get this out obviously as soon as possible. We'll be back at some point with another show, speak to another guest in the Rangers world and look at their Rangers 11. So, David, thank you very much.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for asking me and setting quite an interesting challenge to think about and come up with rather than just the usual one. So no, I enjoyed that. Before anybody points out I'm wearing a hat in the house, it's because the sunlight would have came off my baldy head and blinded you. So it was for your good, viewers, that I wore this hat before you slag me for it.
Yeah, that's fine, mate. Thank you very much. And we'll see you guys next time.